Medical experts have their uses both in civil and criminal trials. But to be useful, they have to be able to offer something that the jury can't figure out on their own. In other words, they have to aid the jury in deciding the case. I'm not sure any of the experts were really necessary in the Ali case. I'll explain more in just a minute. Hi, Tony DeWitt here. I'm a Missouri appellate attorney, retired, and I bring you a fresh perspective on the law without offering any legal advice. So pull up a chair. This is what we're discussing today. An expert witness is designed to tell something to the jury that is not within the jury's common knowledge. So, for example, a doctor who is a pulmonologist might come in and explain how oxygen is transported in the blood. And he might explain how when a blood gas is drawn, that it's measuring the partial pressure of oxygen in plasma, but only 2 to 4% of the oxygen that gets exchanged in the body is bound to plasma. That's why carbon monoxide poisoning is so deadly, because carbon monoxide binds with hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is the principal delivery mechanism for oxygen to the distal parts of the body. So, something like that, which is not generally known about, for example, carbon monoxide poisoning, that would be useful to a jury if the case had something to do with, for example, carbon monoxide poisoning. But when you get a doctor to detail the injuries, usually what you want is a treating physician, and usually it is fairly brief and there's not a lot of pathophysiology or any of that that goes into it. In the Ali case, the state, I think, did not do a good job in choosing experts, and the defense completely missed the point of an expert. Let's get into this and I'll tell you what I think here. First, there was this forensic nurse examiner. Now, there are SA nurse examiners who examine people who have been met criminals in an unexpected way and lost a measure of their dignity. I'm sure you all get the point. There are certain words that YouTube doesn't like, and I don't want to use those words. But the SANE examiners are pretty thorough and they document their findings and they're useful in prosecutions for that particular crime. And here they're using a forensic nurse examiner. They don't preface it with the other two initials to testify about Ms. Ali's injuries. Let's listen to a little of this.
As part of the strangulation exam, you will ask the patient questions about any symptoms or concerns they may have that you may not otherwise visually see yourself with your eyes. What's the purpose of asking the patient about any symptoms or concerns that they may be exhibiting?
The importance is, again, to help me assess and examine potentially any further procedures or scans that may need to happen.
And based on your training experience, are there certain symptoms you would expect to see from a patient who may have had pressure applied to their neck?
Yes.
And what are some of those symptoms?
Difficulty speaking. They could have change in their voice, memory loss, difficulty breathing, loss of consciousness, pain in the neck, some bruising, abrasions, bleeding from the eyes and nose, nausea, vomiting. There could be incontinence of the bowel and bladder, things like that.
And all those symptoms that you described, do you see that in every patient that you conduct a strangulation exam on?
No.
Okay, and why is that?
Everybody's different. Everybody presents differently, and sometimes you could have significant amount of injuries, and others you could see nothing visibly, but there could be some internal injuries. It's just case by case.
Okay. Your Honor, permission to approach the witness.
You may.
Ms. Rivas, I've handed you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 82. If you could look at that exhibit and let me know when you're done looking through it. And Ms. Rivas, do you recognize Exhibit 82?
Yes,
And what is Exhibit 82?
it's my documentation of my strangulation exam with Fatima.
Okay. And would it help refresh your recollection in answering some questions? Let me rephrase my question. Would it help refresh your recollection to review and to read from your report in answering certain questions that will be asked?
Yes,
You have permission to review your report if you were unable to answer the question directly to help refresh your recollection.
thank you.
And Ms. Rivas, as part of the strangulation exam, do you you indicated that you do a head-to-toe exam, but you also testify that you would ask the patient about their symptoms and concerns. As part of, in addition to those things, do you also ask the patient to sort of describe in their own words about what happened during a strangulation episode?
Yes,
And what is the purpose of asking the patient about having them relate to you what had occurred?
to help drive my exam and the areas that I need to focus on.
Okay. And in this case, did you ask Fatima to sort of describe to you in her own words what she remembered happening?
Yes,
Okay. And did she, in fact, tell you what had occurred during the incident?
yes.
Okay. And if you could, would it please, well, let me ask you this. What did Fatima tell you about what had occurred during the alleged strangulation incident?
She told me a lot, but
Miss Rivas, I'm specifically asking you about what Fatima indicated occurred that resulted in, if any, pressure applied to her neck.
she reported to me that she was grabbed by her sweatshirt and placed in a headlock.
Okay. And did she indicate who grabbed her by her sweatshirt and placed her in a headlock?
Yes,
And who was that?
her dad.
Okay. And what did she say? Did she tell you what happened after being placed in a headlock by her dad?
That she lost consciousness.
Okay. Does she tell you anything else that she remembers seeing or hearing?
Could you elaborate on that question?
Sure. So you indicated that she was grabbed by her sweatshirt and that she was placed in the headlock, and you indicated she lost consciousness. Did she say anything else about what she remembers seeing right before, or right after losing consciousness?
She reported that she felt dizzy. She reported some numbness.
Did she also indicate anything about what had occurred with her mom as part of the strangulation exam?
Yes.
And what did she say?
She said that her mom grabbed her, put her hands on her neck.
Okay. And did Fatima indicate to you that when her mom did that, what, if anything, did she do?
She asked her to stop.
Oh, sorry. Gosh, it was really, that was riveting testimony, wasn't it? They picked a bad witness. This witness is having trouble answering the questions, and she did the exam. This has not given the jury a great deal of confidence, I don't think, in either the exam or the findings of the exam, because they're not moving along at a pace that is something that would keep a jury interested. You just, generally speaking, don't conduct an exam in this manner. This is probably a prosecutor who has never had any medical experience, doesn't know how to properly inquire of a medical expert. And so I don't think they're doing themselves very much good here. This exam was done after she had been strangled. And what she certainly should have done was get to the effects of that and do that up front. What happened? What are the possible ramifications of what happened? And what are the long-term consequences of what happened? End of discussion. But that's not what happened. And instead, all they managed to do was make this witness be on the stand for a lot longer than she needed to be, which meant that the cross examination went a lot longer than it needed to go. Let's take a look at some of that.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. Approximately how long did you spend with Fatima?
Approximately with her 3 hours.
Okay. And that's entirely in the emergency department?
Correct.
And were you with her continuously, or were there breaks during that time?
I don't recall there were breaks.
Okay. Is that in your experience, is that a pretty typical duration?
Yes.
And your piece of this is kind of, as you've described, the medical examination of Fatima, correct?
Correct.
And then also kind of getting her verbal description, correct?
Correct.
And then, before you were called in, you had no idea of this, correct?
Correct.
And did you review police reports?
No.
And once you, finalize your report and she is either admitted or discharged or further down the hospital process, do you have further involvement with her?
No.
Okay. And so, safe to assume that you didn't review videos of an incident, right?
Correct.
And that wouldn't normally be a part of your examination, right?
No.
Okay, so you're not necessarily, you have an investigatory role in a medical sense, correct?
I have a role to assess my patient in a
Okay.
medical way.
Okay. Fair. And I'm not trying to, just in terms of you are providing information from a medical sense that is also going to then be used. It gets turned over. We're here in court, right? In a law enforcement aspect, right?
Potentially.
Okay. But it's not your role, and I'm not criticizing, but just kind of defining the parameters. So it's not your role to then further investigate, correct?
Correct.
You're not double checking what she reports based on videos, right?
Correct.
Okay. And I'm not suggesting that you should, okay? Just so we're clear. All right. So do you start with the description, or do you start with the medical examination? What's the order of procedure?
I start by getting consent, and then I do a medical history, and then ask the questions. Basically, I follow this form. So
Okay.
I start on page 1, and I move through to the end of the page.
Okay. And I see Providence. So this is a form that is prepared by Providence?
Correct.
And
you're referring to Exhibit 82.
thank you, Your Honor. And do you have any say in what goes into the form?
No.
So looking on page 3 of 82 is the checklist of symptoms, correct?
Correct.
And it's about 3/4 of a page, single space.
Yes.
And then you're talking, the options are no, during the incident, after the incident, and now, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you're able to differentiate, and she was able to differentiate for you kind of when she had certain symptoms, correct?
Correct.
And there were a few notes as to details that she provided, correct?
Correct.
And those details, as she described, pertain to the actions of her dad, correct?
I believe so. Yes. Correct.
Okay. So then we go to page 4, and there is a very long handwritten page, correct?
Yes.
And that is in your handwriting, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that summarizes her description. I think that is entitled History of Assault, correct?
Correct.
And so at this point, she's then kind of going start to finish, kind of that whole day. There's some stuff that happens before the incident and after. Is that fair?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Now, earlier when she was talking to you, she described certain symptoms, headache, correct?
Yes.
Dizziness, lightheadedness, right?
Yes.
Memory loss, correct?
Yes.
And confusion,
Yes.
among other symptoms that you've previously testified about, correct?
Correct.
And the descriptions that she had are not inconsistent with strangulation, correct?
Correct.
And you weren't surprised to hear her talk about kind of the short symptoms I just listed, correct?
No.
Okay. And so when somebody loses consciousness, how is that medically described? What is going on to the person when they lose consciousness?
What is going on? Well, you could say passing out. They're not cognitively there.
Okay. So that would be describing of memory loss, correct? There you
No.
go. Okay, well, I think this is where lawyers ask obvious questions and we all kind of understand the answer, but we still have to put it in the record. And so if somebody loses consciousness, they're not awake. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. And so they're not perceiving events around them and able to describe. Is that a fair description?
Yes.
Okay. One side effect of that would be memory loss for that period of time, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Captain Obvious here does a pretty good job of filling in all of the things that I think the state probably should have done a better job of getting into the record than the state does. He lays out, memory loss, unconsciousness, headache, confusion, but neither of these exams really got into the consequences of prolonged hypoxemia, or I would put it this way: what happens if he holds that chokehold for another minute? Because if he'd held that chokehold for another minute, there is a pretty good chance she would have died. Now, sometimes it takes 4 to 6 minutes of holding that chokehold to kill someone, but other times, particularly with a weak child like this, you could do a lot of damage with the pressure. It could damage the blood vessels in such a way that there really not much anybody could do about it. So I just don't think either side here did a very good exam of this nurse. And as the nurse explained at the very beginning, I didn't put this in, but she's a health services administrator. She manages the medical services at the jail. She's also this forensic examiner. But again, to me, there is an awful lot lacking in this examination and in this testimony that really should be there. And I'm kind of disappointed in how all this has come in. Now, the state had a chance to bring up their grade a little bit when they took on the second medical expert, who is also a nursing expert. She can't testify to things like reasonable medical certainty, but what she can do is lay out injuries and explain the consequences of this kind of injury. And again, I thought she did a little bit better than the first witness. I thought the first witness lacked all personality and was very dry and matter of fact and frankly boring. Not somebody I would want to have as a medical expert in my case unless I worked with them to what we lawyers refer to take them to charm school, explain to them that they are there to entertain the jury as well as inform them. But this nurse did, I think, a little bit better. You tell me what you think, as between these two witnesses, who you think did a better job.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Fine, thank you.
Please state your name and spell your last name for the record.
Lisa Wall, W-A-H-L.
Are you currently employed, Ms. Wall?
I am.
How are you employed?
I'm a family nurse practitioner at Providence Abuse Intervention Center.
And what is a family nurse practitioner?
I'm an advanced registered nurse practitioner with the capacity to assess, diagnose, and treat.
Okay. And besides working at Providence Abuse Intervention Center, are you also on call sometimes at hospitals?
I am, as a forensic nurse examiner.
Okay. And which hospitals are you on call at?
At Providence Centralia Emergency Department, Providence St. Peter Hospital Emergency Department, and at Madigan Emergency Department.
And besides being employed at Providence Abuse Intervention Center and then being on call at Providence Centralia, Providence St. Peter's Hospital, and Madigan, do you work at any other medical settings?
I do.
Okay, and where is that?
I'm a per diem registered nurse at Mason General Hospital.
Is that sort of weekday thing, weekend?
That is put my son through college thing, so that's my side hustle.
Okay, all right. And you indicated that you are an advanced registered nurse practitioner. What kind of well, let me ask you this. Can you describe to the jury your education background?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from the San Jose State University. I have a Master's Science in Nursing from the University of Alaska in Anchorage. I have a board certification through the American Academy of Nurse Practitioners and as a nurse practitioner, a family nurse practitioner. And then I have board certification through the International Association of Forensic Nurses as a sexual assault nurse examiner, certified in both pediatrics as well as adolescence through adulthood.
And what is a advanced registered nurse practitioner?
I provide patient care through the context of the life trajectory, so from birth to death.
Okay. And then you indicated that you are currently employed at Providence Abuse Intervention Center. What is the Providence Abuse Intervention Center?
The Providence Abuse Intervention Center is within the Monarch Children's Justice Advocacy Center. We provide care to children under the age of 18 as well as developmental disabled adults when there's been a concern that there's been child abuse, neglect, or torture, or some combination therein.
On October 30th, did you review the report that was generated by Ms. Rivas?
I did.
Okay. And did you also review the medical records from Providence St. Peter's Hospital as it relates to Fatima prior to your examination on October 30th?
I did.
Okay. And with regards to the diagnoses that she received, was pneumomediastinum one of the diagnoses?
It was.
Okay, and what is pneumomediastinum?
Pneumomediastinum is a big word. The mediastinum is here in your chest. It holds your heart, your trachea, your esophagus, and major blood vessels in this area. Pneumomediastinum means that there is air in the mediastinum that got there from, say, a medical incident. If you were intubated, it could have caused some sort of a blunt trauma injury or other means in which this air has escaped from your lungs or your airways somehow, and it's now in the mediastinum.
Okay. Now, this might sound like a silly question, Ms. Wall, but is air in the mediastinum a good thing or a bad thing?
That's a bad thing.
Okay. And also, prior to your examination of Fatima on October 30th, you indicated you reviewed the strangulation report that was prepared by Ms. Rivas. Were you aware of the signs and symptoms that Fatima exhibited during her admission into the ER on October 18th?
I was.
Okay. And when you met with Fatima on October 30th, what, if anything, did she say about any vision changes that she had since the alleged strangulation incident?
She said that her vision was more blurry.
Okay. And did she sort of explain to you in what way as to what she was able to see or she couldn't see?
Yes. In the process of a conversation with my patients, I ask in a head-to-toe manner a review of systems, so their health as they understand it from head to toe. And she indicated to me that she normally wears glasses. She didn't have access to her glasses, so that her vision baseline was blurry, but that since being strangled, her vision was, quote, more blurry.
Okay. And what about her hearing? Does she also indicate whether she had any hearing issues since the alleged strangulation incident?
Yeah, so she does not have hearing issues baseline. When she was describing her hearing, when I'm asking her questions about her hearing, she told me that it was, quote, more sensitive.
Okay. And you sort of mentioned baseline. What do you mean by baseline?
Baseline is prior to being assaulted.
And after you examined Fatima on, at the end of your examination of Fatima on October 30th, did you also provide her with a patient care plan?
I did.
Okay. And then subsequent to October 30th of 2024, did you see Fatima again at the Abuse Intervention Center on December 5th?
I did.
Okay. And on December 5th, did she talk about whether she still had symptoms from the alleged strangulation incident?
She did. She talked about how when she got stressed, she would get left shoulder and neck pain. And when she got really stressed out, it would hurt, but she told me, quote, really bad,
Okay.
unquote.
Now, right after this, the state rested their case, and the issue with resting your case at this point is that you haven't really established, at least in my mind, that what happened here could have killed Fatima, and that's that's a problem. And I don't understand how they could have overlooked that. If I were on the defense, I'd make a motion for a directed verdict, and I'd say, look, although the jury could certainly make reasonable inferences, they'd be basing their opinion on on not on medical facts, but on just their general understanding of the word strangulation, and we think that's wrong. That's what I would do if I were forced to represent these two, because I'd have to be forced, probably at gunpoint. But the issue for me here is that this neither one of these two, other than saying, look, we did this examination, this is what we found, get out of it as quickly as you can. You go through it, you lay the foundation, you explain the evaluation, what was found both times, and then you stop. But the problem with this, again, like I said, is that you haven't really explained what happens if you'd held that just a few moments longer. They have an opportunity on cross-examination of the first defense witness, who is an MD, to get this information in front of the jury. Let's see if they get that done.
Testimony about the Macklin effect, you're saying that that is only happens as a result of chest compression. So it's only happening when somebody, there's an external compression on the chest and the airflow has been cut off. Is that your opinion, or are we misunderstanding that?
Well, that is one way that it can happen.
Okay.
So, as we discussed before, if someone takes a deep breath, for example, it's not unlike the scuba diving in a way. If you take a deep breath or you're startled and go down and someone lands on top of you and you have a sudden compressive effect, it's like taking a balloon and squeezing it very tightly. There's a possibility it could pop. If, on the other hand, your mouth is open and you just jump on top of the person, there's not that increased pressure, you're not going to have that effect. So we talked about that compression, but then we also talked about any type of Valsalva maneuver where you're bearing down and you're activating your abdominal muscles and you're bearing down in your chest. What that does is it increases the intrathoracic pressure. And if you do that hard enough, like with violent vomiting or struggling, or sometimes we can see it in wrestling or weightlifting, something along those lines, you can have that same effect.
And so you used wrestling as an example. So when we talk about it in terms of wrestling and bearing down and breathing hard, why did you use wrestling as an example?
Just because I've seen that happen. For example, another thing that you can see sometimes is like petechiae. That's another example of how you can have increased basically backflow that causes little ruptures. In that case, it's with the vascular system, not the airway, but it's the same concept. you, I've seen it with people who've been arm wrestling, for example.
So when you're talking about, let's say, like petechiae or the pneumomediastinum, let's say that somebody is strangling you from behind, they have you in a arm bar and you're gasping for air. Would you anticipate that that could cause a pneumomediastinum and or petechiae?
It could, yes.
Okay. Would that be consistent with the Macklin effect then that you're talking about?
It could, yes.
Okay. You talked about identifying if there is a tear in the trachea or esophagus by potentially doing a scope. Do you recall
Yes.
that? Okay. That's pretty common means for checking to see if there's a tear. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I would say that if you're talking about mucosal tear, that's the only way to see it. You won't see that level of detail on a CAT scan.
Someplace in one of the forums, one of the commenters thought that perhaps this good doctor had had her hair done with a leaf blower, and I'm not sure that's too far off.
So if you're talking about pneumopericardium, can you tell the jury what that is?
So it could be air within the pericardial sac. So you have the heart and then you have the sac that surrounds the heart. And sometimes you can have blood that's going into there, bleeding into that sac. You could, with penetrating trauma, have air. Or you could just have air within the mediastinum itself that is building up and just having a compressive force on all of it, on the pericardium and the cardiac tissue itself.
And each of those complications that arise from the pneumomediastinum could all potentially be life-threatening if things don't go well. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, if you have continued pressure on all of those structures, that can cause collapse of lungs and cardiovascular collapse.
Well, thankfully, they got the right prosecutor in to ask the doctor questions on cross examination, and she did more for the case in the last few minutes there than anybody has done at all at any time with any of these medical people. She established exactly what the risks are and exactly what the consequences could have been from continuing to hold pressure on her neck. And now she's got the evidence necessary at this point to avoid a directed verdict. And that is a good thing for the prosecution. And it's also good that they were able to get in this critical information with the defense witness. The defense would almost have been better to say, hey, we're done. You know, you didn't prove your case, we're done. But they didn't do that. And as a result, now they have to deal with this issue of the state having gotten this evidence in, and it's likely going to prove the case that there really was an attempted murder here. Not that there's really a lot of doubt about that, but the confused mind always says no. When you have the burden of proof, you have to be clear. You have to be crystal clear. And if the other guy mucks up the water, you have to go in there and clear the water out. You have to make it lie still so you can see to the bottom. Because if you don't, if there's still a lot of silt flowing around in there and the jury can't see the truth at the bottom, then at the end of the day, you're going to lose that case and they're not going to convict. And the defense has done quite an interesting job, I think, with a false narrative, but they've done a good job of making it look like anybody but the father harmed this child. And that's a bad thing. I think, again, like I said, it's a false narrative that they've come up with here, but sometimes that's what defense lawyers do. They shouldn't, but that's what they do. It's okay to have an alternative possible theory, but it also has to be tied to some level of fact and not to speculation. And it's not supposed to come in when you have excluded all of the contrary evidence because it's more prejudicial than probative. I think this was a bad determination by the judge, and I am afraid that Mr. Ali is going to walk on this because they haven't met their burden of proof. And again, it may be due to the fact that these prosecutors are not the most seasoned prosecutors in this case. That could be it. And it could be just because they don't have the evidence. They would like to have had it, but they didn't get it, and they weren't able to get it in. If I knew I was going to get these kind of rulings at the pretrial stage, I would have filed for a writ. I would have tried very hard to get the writ done so that an appellate court would step in and say, no, you can't, it's okay for there to be blind justice, but you can't poke the jury's eyes out. And you can't put, noise canceling headphones on their ears to keep them from knowing the truth of what's going on here. We'll see what happens when the jury finally gets this case, and we'll have to pay really close attention to the closing arguments. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments down below. Sorry this one went so long, but this one was pretty interesting to me. That's what I have for you today. I hope you found it helpful, interesting, or maybe both. If there's a subject you'd like me to discuss, please feel free to send me an email at the address above. If you like what we do, please feel free to subscribe and come on back to the beach tomorrow. I release videos every weekday, weather and work permitting. If you have the opportunity today, do a kindness for your fellow man. It makes the world a better place, one kind act at a time. And now, YouTube has some suggestions for other videos of mine that you might like.